members of the public gallery. I declare this meeting open at 7:15 p.m. And I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting has been held on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Item 1 on tonight's agenda is allocation of seating. Under clause 2.8.2 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2002 as amended, that at the first meeting held after each ordinary elections day, the Chief Executive Officer is to allocate by random draw a position at the council table to each councillor, and the council is to occupy that position when present at meetings of the council. The election held on Saturday, the 22nd of October 2022, was a fresh election under section 4.15 of the Local Government Act 1995. And the Standing Orders Local Law 2002, as amended, is silent on seating allocation following this type of election. Both Councillor Coles and Councillor Mack have indicated to the Chief Executive Officer prior to the meeting that they would not object to occupying the seats that they presently occupy. For the purpose of the meeting, I will ask both Councillor Coles and Councillor Mack to please confirm that they have no objections to Councillor Coles occupying position seat number 7 and Councillor Mack occupying seating position number 6.
I've got no issues in being seat number 7. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Mack?
And no objections from me, Your Honour. Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. Under the Standing Orders Local Law 2002, as amended, the following seating allocation is to remain until the next ordinary election in 2023 or until there is a call supported by the majority of councillors to conduct a random draw. Shire President's position is myself, Councillor Rich. Seating for the Deputy President is the Deputy President's position, Councillor David Atwell. Seat 1 is Councillor Dean Stroughton's. Seat 2 is Councillor Michael D'Agostino. Seat 3 is Councillor Tricia Duggan. Seat 4 is Councillor Morgan Byas. Seat 5, Councillor Lauren Strange. Seat 6, Councillor Shane Mack. And seat 7, Councillor Robert Coles. Item 2 is attendances and apologies. We have one apology this evening from Councillor Byas. And I would like to acknowledge our invited guests this evening, Mr. Bob Fawcett and his wife, Justice of the Peace. Item number 3 is public question time. Item 3.1 is public questions. Could I please ask Mrs. Lee Bond to come forward and ask your questions this evening?
Speaking to the Rankhaven residents regarding tonight's agenda item, point 1. Regarding changes to the election of the President, ward boundaries, changes to how many councillors we have in the future, preferential voting. If yes, what major factors are a no-go zone?
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Bond. No, this is no different to any other item Council considers. Section 2.10 of the Local Government Act 1995 provides that a role of a councillor is to facilitate communication between the community and council. Councillors are also bound by legislation, including the Local Government Act, Model Code of Conduct, Regulations 2021, This legislation sets out who may speak on behalf of council, regardless of the issue.
Does council still not support a public vote to elect the president of the Shire and not support preferential voting? And why do you not support these two reforms if this is still the case? If your position has changed on these two matters, why?
Thank you for your second question this evening, Mrs. Bond. This matter will be considered at this evening's special council meeting.
Why does council support the minutes on council?
Thank you for your third question, Mrs. Bond. This matter was previously presented to council in December 2021, where council supported the minister's proposal of tiered limits on the number of councillors. The associated officer report noted that the minister's proposal would limit local governments like the Shire, with a population of 5,000 to 75,000, to a total of between 5 and 9 elected members. The minister's proposed thresholds was consistent with the number of elected member office at the Shire at the time. Thank you, Mrs. Bond. Under the Local Government Act, we are to allow 15 minutes of public question time for OCMs and special council meetings. We still have some time available tonight, so I will take questions from the floor. Is there any public questions from the floor this evening? As always, Mrs. Bond, yes, the audio recording is being made. Is there any further public questions from the floor this evening? Move to item 4, public statement time. Could I please ask Mrs. Bond to come forward and read your statement this evening?
Since the last election and all its fraud. He has been a hard worker in the community for a long time, but not looked for accolades. This is the kind of councillor we are in need of, and I am sure he will not disappoint those who showed support for his election. Congratulations to Rob Coles for continuing to care enough about the ratepayers and residents to live some very exhausting and sometimes tumultuous behaviour displayed towards him and his knowledge and concern for the community of this Shire. Having said nice things about the two new councillors, which are very deserved, I am sure we may buck heads over some matters. I know they will be there for everyone. That has already been proven by both of them. Very approachable. When making decisions on the local government reforms, all councillors should consider what is best for the ratepayer and residents, not your own personal needs, no matter how much it may hurt. I have looked at this from every angle. It won't take much effort to see who will make it all about their personal needs, and that makes you expendable as a councillor.
Thank you for your statement, Mrs. Bond. Item 5 on tonight's agenda is petitions and deputations, of which there is nil. Item 6 is declaration of councillors and officers' interest, of which we have 2. Councillor Morgan Bias declared a financial interest in item 7.1.1, response to the Minister for Local Government's request for local governments to conduct a ward and representation review as part of election transitional arrangements, direct election of president and consequential amendments to ward and representation. As the item relates to the Minister for Local Government's reform agenda, which will potentially impact Councillor Bias's term on council, the extent of the interest is that in considering the matter, council has the option of effectively halving the terms of those elected at the 2021 regular election and the subsequent special election. Reducing terms from the standard 4 years to 2 years, this would result in a 2 times direct financial interest being the loss of sitting fees and the requirement to fund a premature campaign. As noted in the officer's report, page 25, this would mean that all councillors, regardless of the term of their office, would need to contest at the 2023 ordinary local government election. The Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Paul Martin, has declared a financial interest in item 7.1.3, CEO Employment Committee, appointment of members following the section 4.15 fresh election in the North Ward, as the committee deals with matters relating to Mr. Martin's employment. The extent of the interest is that Mr. Martin is the CEO. Mr. Martin will leave the chambers while this item is discussed. That brings us to item 7, receipt of reports. 7.1 is reports. 7.1.1, response to the Minister for Local Government's request for local governments to conduct a ward and representation review as part of election transitional arrangements, direct election of president and consequential amendments to ward and representation.
Madam President, if I could put forward an alternate motion, please, that being option 2 as presented in the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan.
Madam President, before you ask for a seconder, can I just point out that there was a typographical error in the agenda that was sent out and note that correction, just to make sure Councillor Duggan's happy with that. And that is under point 7. Yeah. The 4th dot point should read 8 councillors with no wards rather than 6 councillors. So, Councillor Duggan, are you happy with that word?
Can I actually also point out there was another error where it says 6 councillors with no wards or 6 councillors with no wards, and one of those should be 6 councillors with wards. Sorry, I am getting to it. Oh, my apologies.
The report was meant to read
8 councillors with no wards, but it was 6 councillors with no wards.
Yep, so the report should read the 4th dot point should read 8 councillors with no wards. Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Yes, I'm happy with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
Madam President, not opposed, but I do have a question.
Councillor Strange?
Just in relation to Councillor Bias's declaration of interest, which was pretty detailed. From my understanding, there would be at least a couple of other councils that would be in the same situation. Could the CEO please clarify for me whether there's any ambiguity about a financial interest?
Through you, Madam President, we have asked the department for some advice about this matter, so I might ask the Manager of Governance to answer the question in regards to interest.
Thank you. So when the Minister's letter was provided to the administration reached out to the department to query this exact matter. The department The view is that members are likely to be exempt under 5.63 of the Local Government Act, which provides an exemption from financial interest declarations on the basis that the person intends to be an office bearer of a body established under the Local Government Act. In addition to that, while I'm absolutely very much of the viewpoint that the interests or the matter of interests are for individual councillors to determine, it will be noted that the decision regarding a voluntary method does not bind council to any particular course of action. It is beyond the direct election of a Shire President. That the effect of option 2 is to conduct a ward and representation review, which involves extensive community consultation and then a submission made by that local government following debate at a meeting in January, in which the actual position of council would be set, and then further would be considered by the local government advisory board, the minister, and ultimately the governor, meaning that the decision tonight would not trigger a one-to-one relationship between financial interests and the decision being made by council. In a sense, because tonight council is determining whether to conduct a ward and representation review with the view to implementing the minister's approach.
Thank you, Manager of Governance. Councillor Strange, does that answer your question? Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to option 2 that we have before us? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Councillor Duggan, would you like to open debate, please?
Thanks, Madam President. So when looking at options 1 and 2 and comparing the reform election pathway compared to a voluntary pathway, I took a significant amount of time to look at each point that's been made in this very extensive agenda presentation that's been brought to us, and I thank the Manager of Governance, Dr. Parker, for that. What I can see is that we have concerns for planning time and the ability to do the ward and the representation review and also concerns for the amount of time it would take for public consultation. With regards to the review, I note that what has been put in the agenda minutes items already this evening is quite extensive, and there's been a lot of planning that has already been done. When I compare that to the attachment to which we've been given as an example, I can see that there is a lot of those points that have already been reached. The community of interest, well, especially in our shire where we've got an urban and we've got rural and semi-rural areas, our community of interest in there and the way that they are actually shaped in their separate wards is incredibly important. Our physical and topographical features don't change significantly. The demographic trends and the economic factors are both things that are somewhat dubious at the moment to try and call simply because we are coming out from COVID. I guess for me, the most important thing that I could get from it is the ratio of councillors to electors. We are constantly being reminded that this is a fluid shire. And on page 13, you can see that the numbers in September 2022 and October 2021, there is some variation, but we are obviously keeping on top of that very well. And I once again thank the Manager for Governance for that. The last ward and representation review that was done was in 2018. Now, if we were to do the ward and representation review and have it completed by February 2023, that would be 5 years. Now, the recommendation, according to the Minister, is 8 years at the very most, yet we are saying that we live in a very fluid shire, so therefore it would make sense that we actually do look at doing this review earlier. The other thing too, that I think that this is actually quite a good time for us to be doing a review. We've talked about a consolidation year being this financial year. I think that this is a good thing to do as part of a consolidation year where we get the review done, get it completed by February. We've already got a significant amount of work that's been done towards it. And then we can look at the next financial year and the ones after that being more of a time of growth for our shire. The concern for the lack of time and community involvement, we do have 6 weeks. That's been planned in the time. If anyone's been to my house for dinner, they know the last half an hour is where all the work gets done. We can compress what we would normally do in 8 or 12 weeks into that 6 weeks. And I know that that sounds like it's putting additional pressure onto our Shire staff, but I look at the other way. If we drop all wards and we drop all councillors, we have the potential to have a whole new board of councillors. If we're going to introduce that to our Shire officers, we potentially are hitting them with a lot of increased workload, which they don't have if we go option 2, where we can look at retaining our wards as an option, which if we go option 1, that is taken away from us. The whole concept of the drop your buffs in the survivor terms and start from scratch will undo all of this work that we're seeing here written that Dr. Parker and the rest of the Shire officers have done. And I think all that would do is make these issues things that we then have to deal with down the track. I know that there is some concern that the minister may overrule what we set up in the voluntary pathway. But the worst that can happen from that, from what I can see, is it means that we've done the ward and representation review early, which, like I say, from what I've seen, we're already well on the path of completing anyway. There was also a comment that it goes against the December 6th decision that was made at council. But yet, if we go with the reform election pathway, that we're still going against the decision 6 decision anyway in some parts. And my other point with that is that December 6th decision was made on very, very skeleton amount of information. It wasn't done knowing the extent of what we do now. And if we just keep saying, well, that was a decision made before, we're never going to grow, we're never going to change, we're never going to get an improved Shire. I think that, as I was saying, this is a good time, I think, for us to be actually looking at doing this review, the ward and representation review, because then we can set it in stone and then we can move forward with our growth. And I know that with the minister saying that we need 9 members or 9 councillors at the table or less, if we are still having the option of looking at 2 per ward where we're not changing the wards significantly with a president, that brings us to 8. We can always look down the path at increasing a councillor. This is not new. Before 2018, we did actually have different numbers of councillors in the wards. So North Ward had 4, Northwest had 2, and there was 3 in the South Ward. So if we find there's extensive growth in the South Ward and there is more numbers, to try and keep that ratio the same as what as what is in the North and the Northwest Ward, we can always look at putting an additional councillor in one of the elections. So that to me is such an incredibly easy solution and much more financial and much easier in the long term for our officers than this whole idea of just getting rid of everything and starting again. There's also talk about in the North Ward, there would be the same councils until 2015, and when the next election comes up, and then there would be the separation of 1 into 4 years and 1 into 2 years. Well, that's only 2 councillors, and that can easily be done by the approach that I received word on today from the Director of Corporate Services, where it comes down to who gets the most votes gets 4 years, who gets the second most votes gets 2 years. And if we were to look at doing a reform election pathway, every single councillor would be under that same process. So to say that it's a disadvantage for only 2, but not a disadvantage for 8, to me, just doesn't make sense. I think when we have non-compulsory elections, we run the risk of this wards, no wards, back to wards again, that we actually cause confusion with our voters. And I think that we really run a high risk of losing a confidence from our residents. And that really concerns me when we look at the low numbers that vote already. And that's what is one of my biggest bugbears about local government elections. I'm not a supporter of the non-compulsory approach, but we can't be doing things that cause additional confusions. I do know we had people turn up from the Northwest Ward on the weekend to vote for the North Ward elections. The more of this confusion we put in, the worse it is for our voter base. And I also think that there is some voter fatigue coming in that North Ward, where they would then have 3 elections in 3 years. So I shall leave my argument there. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor Duggan. Councillor D'Agostino, would you like to speak or reserve?
Thank you, Madam President. Just quickly, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Duggan on a very well-researched and well-presented summary on the implications of the alternative motion. Just quickly, I think these changes are going to be forced on us in due course. The government's got the numbers in both houses of parliament, so it will become law. And I think we should be supporting the policy direction that's been made clear. But importantly, I think this is the best thing for ratepayers and residents. So that's my basis. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor D'Agostino. Councillor Atwell, would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, Madam President, having taken regard to all that's been said prior to this, we have a report here and a support from our staff who are, I believe, are far more qualified to know what's going on than what we are. This is a very, very complex matter. And no matter which way you look at it, it's probably going to be forced on us in the end. We all know the government's got a mandate now with the amount of majority they've got to do virtually as they wish to do. So I've based my argument basically on the fact that the officers have spent a hell of a lot of time doing this. And if they had have thought there was a better way to do it, I'm quite sure that being professionals as they are, that they would have come to another decision. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Atwell. Is there any other councillors that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Coles?
Thank you, Madam President. And again, I echo the comments made by fellow councillors and the work that the staff has put into this very complex issue, and also the work that Councillor Duggan has done. So I commend her for that. Quite simply, I wouldn't say I'm the best person to speak to these matters. There's other people in this room that have all been elected, some more recently than others. But what I would say, I think option 2 attracts 2 things. Well, there's 2 parts of option 2. And one is, it's one about the ratepayers' value for money, and the other one is democracy. I'll speak to the second part first. Democracy is quite clear that option 2 supports the need for a publicly or properly elected president. Now, as I said, over the last few weeks, I've been out walking up and down the hills and driveways, etc., and it's quite clear that people want a say in who leads this shire. That is unequivocal. And I could rattle off probably 50 people that I've spoken to in the last week that have said that to me. The key thing about that is we are putting the power back to the people. That is a cornerstone of democracy. What I will say also is the second part of this is the costs. Now, we're looking at reducing the amount of councillors, and I know that it's fairly difficult to work out exactly what that's going to translate to in terms of saving money to the ratepayers. But I'm fairly confident I can sit here tonight and say that if we go down to 6 councillors and a properly elected president, that would save money to the ratepayers. That will save money for the ratepayers. That will save money that can be put to other places. Perhaps we can get gardens mowed. Perhaps we can get verges fixed. Perhaps we can get roads fixed. Perhaps we can get footpaths fixed. Perhaps we could get street lights in better locations. Perhaps we could fix intersections. And those 6 or 7 comments I just made then isn't the world according to Councillor Coles. That is the world according to people I've spoken to over the last 6 weeks. So let's save some money. And I think it's quite clear that going from 9 down to 6 and a popularly elected president would certainly save money. So it's a cost savings to the ratepayers, and it's also the part of democracy. The other thing I would say is this is a complex matter, so I do agree with that comment. The other comment I also agree with is that we don't want this forced upon us. We want to be masters of our own destiny. And there's so many things in life where you know something's going to happen, you take precautions, you know what you can put in place to negate or to make that change better. All part of change management is understanding what that change is going to be and put things in place to satisfy those changes. So we can sit back with our heads in our sand or in the sand and wait for the minister and the parliament to pass this legislation, and then it'll be forced upon us. And I think that's a really key point that Councillor Duggan made, is that then what happens? We then are forced for a split. And look, maybe the community wants that. Maybe the community wants new councillors. Although I sit here tonight after being re-elected on the weekend. But perhaps that's what the community want. But I would say it's not good governance. It's not good for the Shire. It's not good for the residents or ratepayers to have 6 new councillors and a popularly elected president that are not known and haven't been here before. And I can only imagine the concerns and the extra work that would put upon the staff. Now, the other key thing I'll say in closing is the staff have done an exceptional job, and I certainly acknowledge that. However, the key thing about democracy is we are here as elected representatives to serve the community. We are here as elected representatives to give them a voice at the table. It's not up to, and I say this with due respect and respect to everyone that's the staff here, it's not up to the staff to determine what happens. They guide us, they give us the information, they give us the advice, and they give that information, advice and guidance excellently. However, it's our job as councillors to be the masters of our own destiny. And I remember back in July when I stood on the other side at that podium and said, you don't realise the job you have as a councillor until it's taken away from you, and you're sitting over there and you don't realise the influence, the power, the responsibilities you have when you sit around this table. Let's be the masters of our own destiny and let's have a voice to influence the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Is there anybody else that would like to speak against the motion? I'm happy to speak against the motion and foreshadow option 1. And I do thank the input of the councillors that have spoken before me this evening. But there is some misinformation that has been put forward in pieces of debate so far this evening. To go with option 2, to do a ward and boundary review, to ask our community, our officers have told us during Q&A tonight they do not have the time frame in which to do a full and proper boundary and ward review. It would be just a review of what we currently have, which is nothing. It is a nothingness. When local governments do a ward and boundary review, they look at the population in the Shire, they look at the forecast population and growth areas, and they do boundary reviews and movement accordingly. I don't think there'd be that many people in this room that would remember in 2011, this Shire had a total spill when we went from 4 wards to 3 wards. We went from 11 councillors to 9 councillors. It is up to the community to elect and have a say on how their council is put together. It is not up to councillors to dictate what the makeup of council would be. And I don't think as a Shire president and a serving councillor that that is my right. I think the full right for that should be given to the community, and it should be given in a time frame when the work that the officers do is actually meaningful and it moves the Shire forward, instead of just being a review that will tell us nothing, that will just say, we've done a review, we've looked at this, we're going to retain 3 wards. We don't know if that's really what we need because we haven't had the time to look at anything else. And we're going to drop to 6 councillors, giving each ward 2 councillor representatives until the next ward review is done. Now, given that the last ward review was done in 2018, they are due to be done roughly every 8 years. Realistically, our next one in this Shire should probably fall somewhere between 2023 and 2025 to take into consideration the rate of the growth that we have in our area. If a ward and boundary review was done at that time, it would be a full review that would take quite a few months and would involve quite a lot of community consultation instead of being a rushed process. To do a rushed process boundary and ward review now would push the next boundary and ward review out for another 6 to 7 years, which is not feasible for our community and would not give them fair and equitable representation moving forward. The fair option to do now would be a total spill. The minister has said if we don't make a decision, that is what they will do. I originally thought that was a bad thing and that no, we need to retain wards. We need to have our points of difference across the Shire. But we also have to take into consideration that there is no legislation in place at this time to make any of this happen. And we don't know if there will be legislation in place in time for the 2023 election cycle. Remembering that to work into the election cycle, that this legislation has to be in place before June next year. My view is our community should have full say in this. It should not be up to councillors to cherry pick what they want to do. So in my view, given that we are looking at some of the most major local government reforms in the last 25 odd years, it should be our community that has full say in the way we move forward. And that means if it is a total spill for the 2023 election, that means our community has total say. They would elect a president and they would elect 8 councillors moving forward. And then after the 2023 election, a full and considered boundary and ward review can be undertaken and boundary wards can be reinstated moving forward. Thank you. Any other councillors that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Duggan, would you like to close, please?
Thanks, Madam President. I note that one thing that seems to have come from all councillors that have spoken on this matter is that we agree that wards are the best way to represent our council. And yet here we are already a significant way down towards that process, and option 1 would result in all of that work being thrown aside so that we went to no wards. And the other thing that I note that we all agree in is we all have concerns for the community and the way that this is actually perceived by the community. My concerns are very practical in that I feel the community would be so confused over wards, no wards, back to wards. I don't think there is sufficient advertising that can be done to explain this very, very complex process. And to take that step back, go to no wards, and then have to look at reinstating from scratch wards again, to me is just not the best option, and it's not the best way for our Shire staff to have to deal with this either. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. All those in favour of the motion before us? All those against? Motion is carried 5-3. Item 7.1.2.
Madam President, we will need a difference for the reason from the officer's recommendation for the minutes, please.
Yeah, if I may have a little help, I would like to say something along the lines of to allow greater local Shire Council and community control over this transitional process. Local Shire Council and community control over the transitional process. Thanks.
Secretary, can we please have the votes recorded? Move to item 7.1.2, audit. Sorry. Move to item 7.1.2, Audit, Risk and Governance Committee, appointment of members following the section 4.15, fresh election in the North Ward. Can I please have a mover for either option 1 or 2? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll seek to move option 1, and with your indulgence, I'll put forward 2 names.
Thank you, Councillor Coles.
Councillor Coles and Councillor Mack.
Thank you. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mack. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 7.1.3, CEO Employment Committee.
Madam President, I've declared a financial interest in this item, so I'm going to leave the room.
Seven 7.1.3 CEO Employment Committee, appointment of members following the section 4.15 fresh election in the North Ward. Councillors, can I please have a nomination? Thank you, Councillor Coles.
Only because I was up until the 1st of July, so I seek to move option 1 with Councillor Coles as the member.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strawton. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Mr. Martin, Councillor Coles was elected to the CEO Employment Committee unopposed. Item 7.1.4, Bushfire Advisory Committee, appointment of members following the section 4.15 fresh election in the North Ward. I've put forward a nomination and will nominate with option 1. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 7.1.5, Local Emergency Management Committee, appointment of members following the section 4.15 fresh election in the North Ward. Can I please have a nomination for this committee? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Can I have a seconder, please?
Sorry, Madam President. So is Councillor Atwell moving the motion to nominate himself? Or yes? Yes, so Councillor Atwell's the councillor.
Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, councillor Coles. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Yes, as councillor Atwell was the deputy, I'll actually call for nominations for the deputy for that role. Councillor Duggan?
Just waiting for the members. We might bring a report back to a future meeting, Madam President, to actually dealt with this item on that.
Okay.
Or we could do an emergent business, or we could bring it back to a future meeting.
But we can come back to November's meeting because we don't have a meeting before then, do we?
No.
Thank you. Right, we'll bring the deputy's position for that committee back to the November meeting, councillors. Item 8 is motions of which notice has been given is nil. Item 9 is urgent business of which there is nil. Item 10 is meeting closure, and I declare this meeting closed at 8:01 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance this evening.